Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Talking About Innovation. I'm Matthew Laskay, and I'm really pleased to be able to talk about one of my favourite topics today, and that's all about value. And seeing that we're talking about value, I thought it was a great opportunity to get an expert in the field who deals with value proposition and determining value for businesses as a job, as a full-time job. So I'm really pleased to welcome Jennifer Prince, who's joining us from Fifth Ring, all the way from Houston. So welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you?
I'm brilliant. Yourself?
Doing well.
Good. So yeah, as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking all about value, and really the focus is going to be about how do we communicate value with an aim to be able to sell better and to sell more. So the first thing I want to talk about is what actually is value. To me, as an engineer, value is all about having as many features and functions as you can at the lowest price. And that's sort of the definition of when you look at value engineering or value analysis. But when you're focusing on sales and selling more, that value definition might sort of change a little bit. So Jennifer, maybe if you want to explain a bit about what you do and how you determine value.
Sure. So I am a business development manager at Fifth Ring for the Americas. So my day-to-day life is focused on the selling of a marketing communication service. And when we talk about value at Fifth Ring, it's really a nebulous thing. From an engineering perspective, you have one definition. From a finance perspective, you have another definition.
Yeah.
But value really for a marketing agency is about the perception of benefits that your product or service brings to the customer. So it's not associated so much with what something is worth or what someone's willing or the price tag you might associate with a thing.
Yeah.
It's more so about how that product and service is perceived. And if you're a startup, the first thing you want to do before you ever start the company is do a lot of research to determine what your potential market's needs are. So the value of a product,
skipped, isn't it?
It is. People have a really good idea. They think, oh, this would be so cool if I created this product.
Yeah, just want to sell it, want to get it out there.
But until you know that the product addresses the need, it has no value. Yep. So value can be inherent if it's established when the company is being developed.
Yeah, and I think that's a good word that you said, that need. To me, need is what it's all about, isn't it? So when you talk about value, you mentioned worth there. And when you're talking about worth is almost a monetary thing. It's how cheap can I get something for? The cheaper it is, the more value I'm getting. But in actual fact, if somebody doesn't need it, it doesn't matter how cheap it is, you're wasting your money, aren't you?
Right. And the benefit of it could be a need or it could be a want. A classic example to me is Starbucks. What people are willing to pay for a cup of coffee is dependent on the brand value associated with that cup of coffee. So there's value in brand equity. And as a business, really your brand equity is the most valuable asset that you have.
Yeah, so that's a good point. A cup of coffee at Starbucks is actually better quality coffee than your local barista down the road, and I'd probably say that the coffee itself isn't better quality or better beans. It's all about what are you getting for your money. For, I don't know how much a cup of coffee at Starbucks, £2.50 or something. What are you getting for that money versus £2 at a small cafe down the road? You get a name on your cup, so that's pretty good added value, I guess.
Yeah, for Starbucks.
So when people talk to you about selling, you mentioned people love to jump out of the gates and just get out there. They've got an idea or a product, and they just want to get out there and start selling. How do you sort of rein them back and say, hang on a second, where's the value in this to your customer rather than something you think is good?
That's a good question, because when you're talking to engineers, especially, did I lose you?
No, still there.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you rein them back is where I picked up the question. And my point was, when you're talking to engineers or product developers, reining them back requires a lot of conversation and it requires a lot of research. So the engineer has to understand that the value of something, again, is the benefit. It's not the product features. So how you take the step back and do the work required to take a feature and translate it into the benefit to the client is where you really start to define what the value is and how you develop a strong value proposition that you take to the market.
Yeah, exactly. So what is the benefit to them? What is the need? Or my favorite question, which I get told I ask far too often, is why? Why do they need it in the first place? Once you find out why they need it, then you can actually start on determining what it is they do need.
Correct.
Yeah. So you mentioned about how communicating that, once you've kind of determined what your value is or what the product is and how it's delivering value, how would you communicate that to a business? Because it's a bit different to just saying, I've got this great product or this great business, everyone come and buy from me. How do you actually communicate that to a business? And the decision makers, I suppose, are the main ones you want to communicate it to, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. So how you communicate it these days is probably going to be digital. Everything is digital right now.
Yeah, seems to be.
Your website is communicating value. Your social media presence is communicating value, and any and everything in between. So the how is one facet, but really it's about the what, and what you communicate is going to be interpreted as the value, and it's going to set up what that potential customer sees as the benefit of the product.
Yeah.
And when you think about if the value is what the customer is going to benefit or gain from the product, in my mind, there's really only a handful of benefits that anything in the world offers to a customer. It's
True,
time,
yeah.
it's money, it's less stress, it's status, it's community, and sometimes it's also like an emotional. Sometimes it's an emotional benefit too,
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you just want it.
yes, sometimes there is no rationale. So when you think about how you are communicating what that actual benefit is to the customer, that is how you communicate value to that business. And then it's not just about how or the what, but also to whom. So the different personas within a business that make a buying decision all have different ideas about what the value will bring of that product to that specific person. The average B2B buying journey involves 5 to 7 people. So from top of the organization down to the end user, you have very different messaging, very different value propositions depending on who you're talking to. So that end user might care about the time they save with the product, but the procurement manager is going to care about the money and the costs associated with the product. And if it's a technology thing, then the IT department is going to care about the implementation process. So value is really, like I said, if it's a perception of benefits, value to different people has a different message. And how you communicate that depends on who you're talking to and what they care about.
Oh, that's a really good point, because I've never actually thought it in that way, that you've got a different number of layers towards the sales process, and each one of those, even though they're within the same company or the same customer, they all have different perceptions of what is value to them. So you might have to have the one product with different values that you're trying to convey to different people. That's more or less what you're saying then?
That's exactly what I'm saying. So
that's a tough one to try to negotiate then, isn't it?
It is. That's why companies like Fifth Ring are here and happy to help create those value propositions, because each person involved in the buying journey of a B2B sale has a different perception of the value of the same offering.
Yeah, so when you say B2B, you're talking business to business rather than business to a private customer, aren't you?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so, and that's when you're saying there's different layers, whereas if it's a what we call B2C, business to consumer, it's a little bit of a different, the want maybe come into it a little bit more in that instant click sales, rather than having to go through a whole bunch of channels and approvals and then let me check with my boss. And
right.
You can play on the emotion a bit more that way, can't you?
Yes. Yeah. So our latest data shows that, again, there's 5 to 7 people involved in the buying process for business to business sales. So it is very different from a business to consumer or B2C buying process.
So if there's, let's say there's 5 people in the layout, who would you target first if you're trying to sell a product? You know, do you start at the top or do you start at the buyer? You know, where's the typical person you attack first?
I don't know that there's necessarily a first or a second, but rather an awareness of who you're talking to and how you're engaging. So if you're trying to create a strong social media campaign, you really need to make sure that you're identifying the right audience for the message.
Right.
If you want engineers to see all the technical benefits of a product, that's a completely different value proposition from having the CEO of the company see how the long-term cost, value, or revenue generation element of the product is going to be beneficial. So tailoring that value proposition to the right audience at the right time is essential.
Right. So yeah, that's a good point then. It's your whole your marketing campaign, I guess, has to target all 5 or 7 people in that campaign, and then hopefully you get one of those 5 or 7 to hook in first, and then you work the rest.
Yeah, I mean, the strategy of a social media campaign is something that we have entire departments to help companies determine. So what makes sense, who makes sense to target first or second, or what the priority of the campaign is all relevant to the company and the offering. But you must first at least identify that there is going to be some differentiation depending on who your audience is.
Yeah, and you're mentioning social media campaign rather than marketing campaign, and at the start you said it's all going to be pretty much digital. So how do you think, you know, what advice would you give to people about marketing in the 2020s these days is about social rather than this is what we do, come and buy it, isn't it?
Yeah, so what advice would I give people about marketing in general?
The social media marketing, how is that sort of changing the way we market?
I think the world overall is becoming a more digital landscape. That strategy that you develop for marketing overall, again, is case by case. And that's what Fifth Ring does as a whole. All I can say from the outside looking in as the business development manager is that the digitalization of how a company lets people know what its story is and how it's presenting its brand and its products, the digital element of it is becoming increasingly important.
Yeah. You've mentioned a few times the word value proposition. So do you want to maybe explain a little bit about what value proposition is and how do you develop that rather than what value is? How are they?
Yeah. So once you've determined what your value is, if value is the benefits of the product that you offer to the customer, then the value proposition is that hook. It's that elevator pitch, so to speak. It's the way that you communicate in a consolidated way what the essence of your product or your brand really is. And it can entice people to go from just knowing about your brand or your offering to actually wanting to learn more and continue the conversation and figure out how that brand or that product can help that customer solve a problem.
So once you've determined your value, so your value is your benefit or the need to the customer, and that's, you mentioned the who, the what, the how, when, I guess is important as well. You know, when are we actually putting this to market? It's going to have an impact on it as well. So then how do you move from that value definition to developing the value proposition and then marketing that value proposition?
The value proposition is going to be a function of putting the right message in front of the right audience at the right time. Like you said, okay. The when is important. So the developing of that really has to do with knowing all those elements and then making the right proposition, the right statement about what your product or offering is based on what the benefits are going to be for that audience. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, totally. Because to me, it's, you know, value proposition is one of these, I think, words that get bandied around quite a bit these days because we're all having to focus or refocus our efforts on selling, and you mentioned it's, social selling, social media selling, rather than just putting an ad in the newspaper or something kind of selling. So value proposition is about going back and trying to clearly communicate what your value is to the right people after you've determined to yourself what value is, isn't it?
Yeah, could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Break up again, did it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. It wasn't that interesting. No, saying that, value proposition at the moment is one of the terms that gets thrown around quite a lot, because we're having to refocus what our businesses are doing, particularly in the last 6 months. And you mentioned going to social media marketing rather than just marketing, in newspapers and things. So we're having to, a lot of businesses these days are almost having to go away from their successful model back to redefining what their value is now. Has it changed? And then trying to communicate that that value proposition to people. So you mentioned, 5 layers or 5 or 7 layers of people. And I think one part, we've spoken about this before, is why do sales need to know about it? Sales, do they not just need to know what the product is? How do they need to understand what the value is?
You said, how do they need to understand what the product is?
Why do sales need to understand what the value proposition is rather than just what it is they're trying to sell?
Oh, sure. So the value proposition, if it's this condensed version of your brand or your product, um, that's what your sales team is armed with, or it gives them a chance to say in a very short and condensed way, this is what this product is about. In order, again, to entice the customer to want to continue the conversation. So the stronger the value proposition, the better the salesperson like me is able to go to market and get people to want to come along that buyer's journey, from just knowing about the products to actually being incited to take action and make the purchase.
Oh, okay. So do you find it hard on the sales side of it to actually get, engineers or product designers and developers and things to actually communicate to the sales team what the value is to make their job easier? Is it hard to get that information out of them?
Well, we have a lot of tools and workshops that are designed to do just that.
Right.
I think it's about being able to ask the right questions and have a very good understanding of why the engineer is excited about the product. Because
that's a good word, yeah.
Yeah, engineers know their industry, so that their excitement is born out of something. It's not unrealistic that they'd be excited about this new product, but being able to have them explain why, this new technology that processes something 2 seconds faster is so exciting, or why, whatever this new nut or this new bolt is going to help a building. So helping, that's one of the things that Fifth Ring does well, because we focus on certain key industries like energy, industrials, petrochemicals.
Yeah.
We have a lot of market knowledge. So we're able to take the engineering talk, the engineering ease, and translate it into actual benefits that a customer is going to want to hear.
Right.
Customers aren't always just engineers. So
no, and you've also got offices in different locations. So obviously you're in Houston. I think you've got offices in Aberdeen and a bunch of other places as well. Do you find that the process is different dependent on location as well as industry, or is it pretty much all that same path?
The path to developing the value proposition is the same, no matter the region. The messaging that comes out of it is, of course, regionalized. So, and that's any product. Culturally, I don't think McDonald's sells burgers the same way they do in Houston as they do in Singapore. So what's good about having a global presence is being able to realize that there are regional differentiations in how people are going to be communicated to across the world.
Yeah, so you've got the different industries to draw the experience of, and you've got different regions and locations as well. So throw that all into the big mix and you've got a brilliant value proposition, I suppose.
Correct. That's it.
Do you find that the the value that people are having with their products is having to change? You know, I mentioned that, you know, the last 6 months we're having to sort of redefine what a business does. Do you find that a lot of people are going back far enough to redefine what the value is, or do you think they're just trying to find new markets to sell to and skipping the step?
It's a combination of the two. I mean, if you look at the energy industry in particular, some people are going to try to figure out ways to make their product more cost efficient because of the
Right.
nature of the value of a barrel of oil. Other companies are going to try to figure out how to spread their reach, diversify their company, maybe tap into new types of energy or new regions. And anytime you make a change within a company, it requires a new look with fresh eyes on what your
Okay.
marketing is doing. Because marketing is just telling the story of what's going on externally to the internal and external shareholders.
Yeah.
And the way we look at marketing at Fifth Ring is, on the one hand, you have the brand and brand awareness and sort of just the marketing of the brand itself. On the other hand, you have the selling stuff element. So the products and offerings that you offer, how are you marketing those things in a way that actually ties into what your sales team, the inbound activity that your sales team needs, the lead generating, revenue generating activity. So when you have those two facets of the organization, anytime you make a change, there's an opportunity to retell your story in a way that's going to enhance one or the other or both.
Okay. So if you were able to give one piece of advice to somebody who was having to redefine and refocus their business, you know, with the changes that are going on, what would you recommend as a good starting point that, you know, you need to do this first before, you know, going out and developing a new product or something?
Before developing a new product?
Yeah, you've got a business which has been running well for all this time, and now all of a sudden we're having to, you know, they use the word pivot or change direction of what we're doing, selling, marketing to. What would be the first step that you would recommend someone would do?
I would say talk to the market. Figure out if your product is not doing so well because people's buying parameters have changed, businesses' buying parameters have changed, or is it really that your product is becoming obsolete, or, you know, what is the reason why you're not seeing the same revenue generation that you were seeing before?
Yeah.
And once you're armed with some data, now you have a little bit more to go on than just trying to reach the bottom line.
Yeah, okay.
And you'll be smarter how you communicate whatever your change is, because it's in direct response to what you heard the market say.
Yep.
So I think you have to start with data. And I was an analyst in the past life, so I'm always looking for data before I make a move.
I think that's a really good point to finish on then, is that we often forget, and when we're selling, when we're developing products, when we're coming to new things, is the customer, isn't it? So research before you start what the customer thinks they want, need, what the benefits are, and then when you're finished, do it again to make sure that what you've come up with is still a benefit. So customer has to be the focus. So it was actually a really good answer that it ties it all in. It's all about the customer, determining value based on who the customer is, why they need it, and then what it is. So good.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. I think that's a pretty good summary of, we're all now experts in value and how we're going to sell it to people. So what I can do now, if you're okay, is we'll throw it open to some of the people who have joined in. So
Sure.
Anyone who's there, if you want to, feel free to turn your camera on and your microphone on and ask Jennifer or myself, if you really want to, any questions you've got.
Hi, Jennifer. So your main market is, your main clients, engineering clients within oil and
They're
gas
not necessarily
and energy?
just the engineering people. Our clients are the business. So we have energy clients, we have petrochemical clients. We have a wide range, but predominantly I'd say energy, petrochemicals, industrials, logistics, those kinds of clients.
So have you found, since certainly after, with COVID, that a lot of businesses are going more onto the energy side from the petrochemical side?
I think that's a case-by-case point, and I have to caveat whatever I say with, I joined Fifth Ring in April. So I am a pandemic hire, and so everything I've seen has been colored by the pandemic. So I can't really give you the that was then, this is now story. But I would say doing the business development side of things, we're still getting interest wherever they fall. And the strategies they're developing as a whole on how to survive the pandemic are varying depending on a lot of factors. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I run a job site, a global niche job site. So our focus is the client, and obviously the engineers would request the recruitment teams to hire individuals.
Okay. Cool.
Good, thanks, Claire. I think it's a good point though. It's like you mentioned earlier, Jennifer, it's not just about one industry has one method of determining what the value is in selling, is it? It's a kind of a toolkit for this is how people need to think, and you need to think about why do they want it.
Yeah.
Great. Peter, I can see you eagerly awaiting to ask a
Hi,
question.
Jennifer.
Say hello.
A question. I launched my product, which is training and coaching for oil and gas project engineers, right at the bottom of the pandemic, or right at the peak of the pandemic. And marketing and sales is something that's very new to me. I'm not a big organisation. There's only a few of us, but are the principles that you were talking about, are they just as relevant for small organisations that are really just starting as big organisations?
I would say yes. It's probably even more relevant because the small organization has even less of a margin of error to operate within. So making sure you have data-driven reasons and customer-centric reasons for why you are marketing the way you are, how you're selling the way you are, is going to have an even bigger impact on your sales and revenue generation.
This is all a new area to me. I'm finding it quite interesting, and I've been busy scribbling down lots of comments as you were delivering your talk there. No, thank you.
Good. I should also mention that I work for a company called Fifth Ring, as I mentioned, and we're hosting something called Fifth Ring Academy. We started it months ago in the middle of the pandemic as a response to companies' need to understand more things about marketing, as a free value add. So all of our Fifth Ring Academy curriculum is free. If you go to fifthring.com/academy, you'll be able to sign up for them. And if there's any past content, feel free to find me on LinkedIn or through Matthew, and I'll be happy to make sure you get.
I'll put the link at the bottom of the video as well, so anyone who's watching this,
no, thank you.
Can just get to the bottom of the link and join that way.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Anyone else before we let Jennifer head off to what must be a lunch break, I guess, over there?
Yeah. I had a snack before this to make sure I wasn't going to get too grouchy. So I'm good.
Yeah. No. All right. That's brilliant. Is anyone anything else you want to add to that, Jennifer? Or?
No, I think that's good. Please do feel free to ask me questions. I'm always available to network with online, on LinkedIn, via email. I'm just happy to be a resource. So let me know if there's anything else
that's
I can
the
do.
reason we connected in the first place. Back, it must have been about April, I suppose, and to have that cross network industry, some people to talk to and different experience and things. So Fifth Ring obviously have been a great help with that. So that's why I was keen to get Jennifer on today. And thank you very much for your time out of your nice sunny day over there to join us. And
you're very welcome.
Thank you to everybody else who joined in. So this will be on the YouTube hopefully tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you very much, and see you all soon.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.